because when I came home after 8 years, I paroled out to my brother's walk-in closet.
I still got 3 years of parole left.
Hey, Terrence, how are you?
Hey, Brenda. It's an unstoppable day. How are you?
You know, I am absolutely fabulous, and I love this show. I absolutely love the guest that we have coming because she is a true definition of the meaning of 2F. Now, I interviewed her. I met her because she knew somebody that I was a roommate with while I was incarcerated. And I guess we connected that way because her name was Stephanie, and Stephanie said, you got to meet this gal. And I interviewed her back in COVID before I was even doing BTBY or From Felon to Fabulous. And I was just trying to educate the public about the good, the bad, the ugly about incarceration. So we did a little interview then, and then she just kind of joined our community. And let me tell you, talk about change being real. Isn't that what we're all about?
Absolutely.
So
Let's
start off for the people who don't know you. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is Mr. Unstoppable himself, Terrence Leftridge.
Hey, Felon to Fabulous family. You know, it's all about the mindset, and we are glad that you chose to make up your mind to watch us live or watch us on the replay on E360 TV this evening for another great episode of From Felon to Fabulous. Brenda, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to interview our special guest this evening. So I'm going to throw it back over to you to do that setup for us.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring up Sarah Bastin. And, you know, she did 6 years in the feds, 6 years. But prior to that, she was actually on the lam. She was running from them. She was hiding from them. And she tells the story about how her door got kicked in, and it was, looking back, the best day of her life. So welcome, Sarah Bastin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you both.
Hey, Sarah, how are you doing this evening?
I am amazing. And I say that because really there's nothing else to say. The life that I'm living today is a life that I could not even have imagined. The opportunities that I have today, all the things that I'm involved in, all the ways that I'm able to motivate and encourage others, strengthen others, as well as continue to motivate and strengthen myself. It's amazing.
Well, Sarah, you and I met.
That's a great word for it.
Yeah.
Sarah, you and I met because of Stephanie.
Yes.
So you did time with Stephanie. Was it in California?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We were both in FCI Dublin together. She and I both worked for the CMS department, which was everything that did the plumbing, and we did concrete, and we did all types of things throughout the compound. And she and I worked there together, and that's how I met Stephanie.
Stephanie was my roommate for 5 months in the Leavenworth Detention Center, which is a federal holding facility. Yeah, it was CCA, Correctional Community of America back then. I don't know. It since has changed. I'm not sure what the acronym stands for now, but still CCA. still CCA. And, I think Terrence has some questions for you.
Well, Sarah, the show is called From Felon to Fabulous. And so we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the fabulousness that comes with that journey from moving from felon to fabulous. So why don't we just start? Why don't you take a minute or so and just tell us about your journey into that felon life? And then we're going to jump in a little bit later to see how you're living the absolutely amazing, fabulous life that you're talking about now. So the stage is yours.
Well, I don't think anybody ever really wakes up and decides today I'm going to become a felon. That's the first thing I want to tell you. And it was never really something that I imagined would happen. The first time I went to prison, I went to state prison, and I arrived there believing I didn't belong there. I arrived there feeling entitled, feeling that this was not what was supposed to happen. And what I learned over time is that all the things that I had carried for so many years are what was actually brought me to that first prison sentence. And I learned a lot about myself, but I didn't learn enough about myself to feed myself. And so I got out and I did some things and I thought I did them right. And I turned right back around within no time and I went back again. And that cycle pattern stayed that way until I caught my federal case. And I caught my federal case in 2013. And then I ran from the feds for a year. And during that time that I ran from the feds, I didn't believe that it was ever, I knew that it was going to rise to a head that was not going to be pretty, if you will, but I didn't know what that was really going to look like. I knew what the federal guidelines looked like for me with my criminal history. However, I didn't know exactly what that was going to feel like once I was finally incarcerated, once I was finally apprehended. And my federal guidelines were really high from the very start because of my criminal history. A mandatory minimum of 10 years, a maximum of 20 years. The guidelines dropped me somewhere in around 13 years, but I had an amazing attorney. And I believe that all the things that happened along the way were things that were meant to set me up for where I am right now. And so I never believed that I was going to serve all that time. And in the end, I took an 8-year sentence and I served 6 years on 8 years. And
so let me ask you this, Sarah, as to look at you right now, somebody's watching, they probably would say, this is not the face of a felon.
No.
But we talk about the mindset. So what was it about your mindset at that time that ended up leading you down a road where you ended up running from the feds? So talk to us about what your mindset was at that time in your life.
So when I caught my federal case, I knew that I was going to go back to prison again. And having been to prison 2 times before that, I absolutely did not want to have to go through with that. I tried. I kept convincing myself that if I go to court and I show up and I be responsible, they're going to cut me a break. But I knew inside that that wasn't real. I knew that if I got anywhere near the courthouse, that they were gonna incarcerate me. They were gonna take me, and that was gonna take any shred of freedom that I would have. And at the time, I was married to my ex-husband, and we were like oil and water. We were totally toxic for each other. It was a terrible situation, and so he convinced me, oh my gosh, we'll never see you again. They're going to lock you up forever, your federal guidelines, so on and so forth. And he convinced me not to go. And so that court date came and it went and I didn't go. And when that happened, and my attorney at the time, and she was a godsend too, because the whole time I was on the run, I would call her and touch base because I had co-defendants also, and she would tell me, as an officer of the law, I have to encourage you to surrender yourself, But she was sworn to confidentiality, so she couldn't break where I was at or that I had been in communication with her. And so I would continue to keep touch base with her, and she would always try to encourage me to turn myself in. And so it was the absolute fear of, one, the unknown, because I didn't know how long truly I was going to serve, and that looming 10-year, 20-year process over my head. And two, knowing that any shred of freedom was going to be gone.
Wow. That's an amazing story, and thank you for sharing that. And as the audience sees, you had 3 times in the system. You were in the state system and in the federal system. Were there any differences between the state system and the ultimate federal lockup that you ended up having to serve?
They're pretty similar. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're incarcerated. And I've said this always, every time, is it doesn't matter if you serve a day. It doesn't matter if you serve 13 years. Any level of the dehumanization that happens, the demeaning behaviors that get put upon you, your level of freedom that gets taken from you, it all is the same, really. And so, people say, oh, well, the food is better in the feds. Well, it was all right. It wasn't anything to write home about. I will say this, though, they did give us better food on holidays than they did at the state facility. But it was one to the next. It was very similar. Transportation is the same. You're still handcuffed and shackled and transported like cattle, really. I did get to fly Con Air as a Fed, which is a real airline that they call Con Air, and it's it has marshals on it and what have you. But one to the next is really no different. It's still incarceration, and you're still not participating, one, in your life, and you're not participating in your loved ones' lives. And that was the biggest thing.
Sarah, you decided when you went in this last time that you were going to change.
Oh, absolutely.
You did something about it while you were incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
Touch on that.
I think that mustard seed of desire for change had been there even when I caught my last case. I knew that the life that I was living was not something that I wanted to live anymore. And then when I didn't show to my federal arraignment and I became a federal fugitive, well, all bets were off, right? I had to ride that out, just for lack of a better term. So change was not going to happen at that time. So when I got apprehended, it really was thank you, really, truly, because now not only was I going to be forced to have to face not only myself, but the circumstance that I had created. And so when I got to federal holding, when I finally went through processing and I got to federal holding, I was really fortunate that they didn't keep me in Sacramento, which is where my case was out of. My case is out of the Eastern District of California. And so they sent me to a really small facility where they did a courtesy hold for feds. And at that facility, I was able to really take a look at who I had been and who I wanted to be when I got onto the other side. And that's when I decided I'm not going to be that same person when I get out. It doesn't matter how long. I didn't have any idea how long that was going to be. And the biggest thing for me also is
at that point, not to cut you off. At that
Sure.
point, did you know you mentioned who you were and who you wanted to be? Who at that last point, at that aha moment, who was Sarah and who did Sarah want to become?
Sarah was somebody that didn't believe in herself. Sarah was somebody that didn't set goals, didn't have motivation for anything other than criminal activity. I had done other things in life. I had other opportunities in life, but because of the fact that I was so immersed in criminal behavior, I couldn't see that person. I couldn't remember who that person was to get back there. If for that's the best way I can say that. And so I didn't believe in myself and I had no confidence and I was busy. The only thing I was busy trying to be was somebody that seemed important, but really how do you measure importance in criminal behavior? You don't.
Right.
It's more like a notoriety, and it's a misplaced respect or notoriety at that. And in addition to the fact that the first time I went to prison, I had a son, and my son was 5 months old the first time I went to prison, and my parents came and got him, and my parents have raised him the whole time. And so when I caught my federal bid, my son didn't even really know who I was. He knew that I existed, but he didn't have any basis to know who I was or anything about me. And what I wanted to be when I got onto the other side, when I finally saw it all through and served all my time, is I wanted to be somebody that you could introduce, that you would introduce to your child. And now who was I going to introduce myself to mine?
Right. Right. You know, a lot of people that I saw during incarceration was these moms who either had a relationship with their kids or they did not. There was really no in between. So they either had what you had going on where they had been in and out or just lived a life where parents had stepped in and took over, or my situation where I had a relationship with them and I was able to have that support. So, but my kids were older, but at the same time, you still had those emotions, you know, what's going on with my kid, you know, you still love your child. But I also saw people who had babies in prison, you know, and babies ripped out of their arms and sent to their families and, you know, by their own doing. I'm not justifying that was a, you know, but just the emotional strain of not knowing what's going on. And I'm not saying men don't go through it, but I do think it's harder on the women.
So the first time I went to prison, when I went to California State Prison, I went to Valley State, and in the room that I was in, it was an 8-woman room, and there were 3 ladies that were lifers, myself, and then there were 3 ladies in there that, I think there was only 7 of us in there at that time, and there were 3 ladies in there that were pregnant, and one had just delivered her baby, and 2 of them were still actively pregnant, and one of them delivered while we were all in that room together. And so just like you think as a mom, you go to the hospital, you deliver your baby, you're going to go home with your baby in a couple of days. Within, I think it's 48 hours, she had returned to the cell to live with the rest of us. And one gal, her baby actually went home with her family. So that was a bonus, and she only had 6 months left. But the other gal that was in there, she had no family. And she was orchestrating a way that it wasn't CPS, but it was another organization that was going to step in and care for her child and foster her child until she was finished with her sentence. And of course, at this time, I think my son must have been about, I don't know, maybe 9 months old or something. And so I'm still a brand new mother in myself. And I'm thinking, how would I have even gone through that?
Yeah.
I was still going through postpartum my own self. So that was very hard to watch.
I bet.
Hard to watch.
So then you did something else while you were incarcerated. You wrote a book.
I wrote a book.
You got fit. So talk to us about that.
I got fit. So one of the biggest things that I had always been unhappy with, ta-da, there it is, fit on the inside. One of the biggest things I'd always been and always done is I'd always stuffed all my food and stuffed my emotions with food. Not just drugs and what have you, but food was the biggest gateway for me that led to lots of issues with self-confidence and so forth. And so I always would come home from prison heavy, unhappy, unsatisfied, and it would start my cycle all over again. And so I thought the first thing I wanted to do was focus on something that I could control. And that was my weight and what I was going to do about it. And so I got involved. There were some other ladies in the unit that I was in, and I said, hey, let's start working out. And okay, let's start working out. And, you think about working out, and I thought, well, we all know jumping jacks and we know squats, and those are easy things and so forth. But let's take this to a different level. And so I started researching, and I started talking to some of the correctional officers that were there. One lady in particular, and she's actually a dedication in my book. And I started picking their brain, and I started finding out different types of workouts. And then one of the girls' sisters started sending us stuff in from the internet and magazines, and I started reading more. And then it was a facility that the downstairs had men in it. And so one of the guys, a group of guys downstairs would work out in the outside rec yard, and he had a book, and he went off to state prison, and he left me this book. And I still have that book today. It's written by a man named B.J. Gador, and it's called Your Body is Your Barbell. And it's got all these different moves about how you can just use your body weight in different types of sequences and patterns and make up exercises and make up fitness routines. And so that's what I did. And I was like a sponge. I consumed all that I could. And I started to devise workouts, and I set us up, and we started to work out. And then I decided, well, I'm doing all this working out, but I'm still stuffing my face with this whatever I can. So let's change both behaviors. And that's what happened. And before you knew it, I'd lost 45, 50 pounds. A bunch of the ladies in my group lost a bunch of weight. And we were, we continued to encourage each other. We continued to motivate each other. We stayed committed. And it was great. And it was a really thriving time. At the same time, I started to feed my soul also. Mm-hmm. And I fed my emotional capacity, because now I had been clean for a while, and I had been incarcerated for a while, and all that stuff that I'd been standing on started to break free. And I would cry, and I would journal, and I would cry, and I would get letters, and I would journal. And like I've said before, and I say this all the time, it was the open gaping wound that I'd always had, but I had just kept putting bandages on it. And I had finally just ripped off that bandage. And let's just take it, just ripped it off, and let's start healing it. And that's what I did.
Wow. That is a great story, you guys. You're watching From Felon to Fabulous with our special guest, Sarah Bastin. I'm Terrence Lefteridge. This is Brenda Ringwood. We're having a fabulous conversation here on E360 TV. Hopefully, you will continue to tune in to From Felon to Fabulous. So now, Sarah, I want to ask you, because the book is entitled Fitness on the Inside. Now, when you think about fitness, the person usually thinks about the outer appearance, working on the outside. Why was this so important for you to title this book Fitness on the Inside?
So during that time, we were all together. I decided that I wanted to write a book because of the fact that there was nothing available to what I felt, there was nothing available to women, to encourage women. And so I started to write down all the workouts and just any kind of information that I felt like one would need. And the original title that I wanted to call it was Just Keep Breathing, because I used to tell everybody through that journey, the only thing you need to do is just keep breathing, right? Whether you're working out or you're going to court or you're dealing with your family or you're facing the pent up emotions, just keep breathing. So I hung on to that memoir that I wrote, and I sent it home to my sister, and I finished out my federal bid. And when I got home, I decided that I was going to bring that book to fruition. And so my sister helped me publish and lay it out. And when we went back to go over the name, she said, I think Just Keep Breathing might not be the title that you want for it. She said, I think it's going to we should look at some other titles. And we looked at doing things like, federal fugitive becomes fitness fanatic or something. And then we came up with fitness on the inside, right?
Which, by the way, you go by the fitness fanatic.
I do go by the fitness fanatic. I do go by the fitness fanatic. And if you talk to most people, they'll tell you that I'm definitely crazy. I'm definitely fanatical about my fitness.
We love your crazy.
Yes. So that's how we came up with
So
it.
out of all the titles,
go ahead.
Out of all the titles that you guys kicked around, why did fitness on the inside really stick for you?
It really stuck for me because a lot of the workouts were ones that you could utilize incarcerated. And because of the fact that I wrote it for women that didn't have any resources incarcerated. And I knew that if there was one of me, there had to be two of me. When I finally went to Dublin, when I finally went to FCI Dublin, there were lots of me that worked out. The federal holding, the courtesy site that I'd been at for 30 months before I finally got fully sentenced and then transported to Dublin, there was only a few of me. But when I got to 1,000 people population, there were lots of women that were into fitness, lots of them. And of course, and we're like one another. We find each other. We're like magnets. And so I really felt like for the women that didn't have resources or didn't have other ladies close by, or maybe they just had a friend that they could encourage, maybe they should have a resource. And so that's where the fitness on the inside came from. In addition to the fact that I talk about my story and how it led me to being incarcerated and how it led me to healing the internal emotional scars that I had had.
If you didn't have that project while you were incarcerated, what would your life of incarceration been like?
If I hadn't had that project?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole time I was incarcerated, from federal holding all the way through until I was at camp facility and went on an ankle monitor, I always found a job. I always found some kind of a job, whether it was a porter or the librarian or anything like that. I worked laundry, I worked in the kitchen, a lot of different things. So I know that what was different about the last trip that I went to prison and the 2 trips before it is I was more focused on doing something different than the times that I had before. Like the first time when I went to prison, I just ate and I hung out in the day room.
Not healthy at all.
And I watched TV and I waited for the time to go away because I only had 13 months. the second time that I went to prison, I got into trouble, tobacco and all kinds of other stuff. And it was just a perpetuation of the same behavior that I lived on the outside. And so I didn't want to do those. I didn't want to do that. I'd slept time away. I tried, in there, I'd sleep days and days away. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something that was different and actively participate in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Sarah, you did something about it. Now let's
Mhm.
shift gears.
Yeah.
You get out. Now what?
Well, when I got out, I had been away for 6 years. So the first thing that happened is, even before I got out, about a year before I got out, my sister and my brother-in-law said, listen, we don't think you should go back to California. We don't think you should stay in California. We think that you should relocate and you should move to North Carolina. And I thought, well, really, there's nothing in California for me anymore.
Just trouble.
Just trouble. And by then I had already filed for divorce from my ex-husband. I hadn't heard from him in years. And so I said, sure, okay, that sounds good. Not to mention my parents and my son lived in the same area. And they said, you'll come to live with us. I was like, okay, sounds good. So all that transferred and processed. And so it came to pass. And I got on a plane straight from California. I flew to North Carolina. And I had never even been to North Carolina. And I had no idea where I was going. I had nothing. I owned nothing. And so when I got here, one, I was in a new place. And two, I had been out of society for 6 years. So I didn't even know how to go into a convenience store anymore and navigate my way around.
Let alone a smartphone.
Oh, my sister, listen, my sister, for months, I would hand her my phone. I would tell her, can you show me how to use this? Because I had no idea how to use any of that. The last thing I knew was flip phones. So I had no idea how to use any of that. And still, sometimes I have to hand my sister my phone and tell her, can you show me how to do this, please? Because I wasn't that person. So when I got here, I just wanted to start over. And I didn't really know what that looked like, other than I knew I wanted a job and I knew I wanted to find my own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I had saved money while I was there, and it wasn't a bunch, but it was enough that I was able to get clothes and get started. I went to a halfway house put me on ankle monitor, and they sent me home to my sister's. And I went and applied for a few jobs, and they didn't take me. And I think that's because I wasn't supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. Those weren't the jobs that I was supposed to be. And so when I applied to the job that I have now, I straight in went and told him, listen, I'm on a federal ankle monitor. I just got out of federal prison 3 weeks ago. And, and he said, it's all right. We're going to hire you. And that was due to the fact that the last job I had in prison, I had worked in warehousing. I learned how to drive a forklift. I learned how to drive a flatbed truck. I learned how to count inventory. And I even had a recommendation from one of the COs there that said, if you need me, I will speak on your behalf.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, we're going to take a short break. We're going to play a couple commercials, and then we're going to talk about what you've done since.
Okay.
So everybody just stay tuned, and let's see what we have in store for this type of stuff. And what I want you guys to think about is imagine yourself in her situation. Just imagine you're ripped out of your freedom. You're fat. Your child is at home with your parents.
Yeah.
Your family's in another state, miles, all the way across the country. And you're having to decide how you're going to do this life in prison. So I want you guys watching to just imagine what that looks like. and then watch these commercials.
Welcome back to From Felon to Fabulous with our special guest, Sarah.
Terrence has a delay. So he has a delay, so he's hearing things a little bit. Like he sees the little glitch, and then he's ready. But we're working all from home. Sarah and I live in the country, so I'm surprised our internet's working as well as it is.
I know. I feel like this is great.
Yeah, and Terrence actually lives in the city, and he's having glitches, so he's a little delayed. So if you guys see that, that's what's going on. So I'm gonna turn it over.
Nothing like live TV. Well, welcome back to From Felons to Fabulous. We're having great conversation with our good friend, Sarah Bastin, author Sarah Bastin, author of the book Fitness on the Inside. She's telling us about how many people, they go and they become incarcerated and they let the time pass away, but she actually went in with a different purpose on her last time, and she made the seconds count. She took this time and she turned it into a memoir, and she got out of prison, and life was waiting for her. Things that she had did inside now were making room for her on the outside, and that's where we want to pick up the story From Felon to Fabulous for the amazing Sarah Bastin that's on us. And Sarah, I want to pick up from when you got to your sister's house, because many times when we do these shows, the guests we talk to, their relationship with their family may have been strained when they went into prison, or it may become strained once they got into prison, or it may be disastrous on them getting out of prison and getting back into life. So how was that relationship with your family once you returned home? And then I want you to touch on when you picked up the memoir and decided to turn it into a book.
So the relationship with my sister was always strong. I hadn't seen my sister in years, but my sister was my advocate the whole time I was gone. And so she was also kind of the liaison, if you will, because my dad would speak to me intermittently here and there on the phone sometimes, but more he wrote me letters. But my mom, I hadn't spoke to my mom in probably 5 years at least. And so my parents didn't. My mom was convinced that I wasn't gonna make it, even before I ever got out. My mom, and I don't blame my mom for that. Let me just say that. My mom had been burned and burned again. Let's just put it like that. Honestly, she had heard me cry wolf and cry wolf and cry it again, and my dad too. And so they were reluctant, and they were guarded, and they were suspicious, not cautious, suspicious. Whereas my sister and my brother-in-law were advocates right behind me the whole time. And that's who, and even that, and I know they even got flack when they told my parents, hey, she's going to come and live with us. Really. So that had to develop organically, that had to develop naturally. And the only way that was going to happen was by me It was only going to happen
Your
by
actions had to prove the change.
absolutely the actions. It couldn't just be me talking out the side of my head. It had to be me saying and watch me doing at the same time.
But
And
once you got past that, because I've met your mom, she's been to our
yeah,
event.
yeah,
The relationship is great. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit because we've just got a little bit of time left. You are now, you've had promotions at work. You've
yeah,
bought your home.
yeah.
You're in a great relationship with your person that you're spending the rest of your life with, and you've got your books into prisons now.
Mhm.
So talk about that.
So I wrote the book. I decided that I was gonna, and for every book I sold, I would donate to books. I've donated them to 25 to prisons in 25 states. I can't even tell you how many actual prisons, but I know they're in 25 states. I still get inquiries on the book, and it wasn't so much something that I wanted to earn from. It was something that I wanted to do for somebody else. At the same time, during that time, I continue to progress in my work. I've gotten promotions at my work. I've got tenure at my work. I'm a leader at my work, and that's been a big deal. And I decided in my first year out of prison that I didn't want to rent and I wanted to own. And so I rebuilt my credit and I did what I had to do and I stayed on task and I bought a home.
You did the work.
I did the work. I actually
Yes.
just this last October, I just bought a brand new car. I had never, ever in my life been able to walk onto a car lot and buy a brand new car.
See your value?
Right. And
See
it's
your
because
value. But you created that value.
and it's because I did what I said I was going to do. And I stayed committed to the things that I was going to do. And that was how that's how the relationship with my family continued to develop. I continued to show up and participate. I continued to do the things that I said I was going to do. And
That
it
makes
wasn't,
a difference.
it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. And that's the biggest thing with when you're a felon is all too often we either don't say we don't do what we say we're going to do, or we don't believe that we can do what we want.
Just said it. You don't believe it. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. You have to believe that. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought. Go ahead. Finish your thought, Sarah. You have to believe.
You have to believe that opportunity in life is there for you and that you can go for that. If you have that burning desire to chase down your life as a felon, do it. Because it's there.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. You also have gotten some education for yourself. You've invested in yourself. You took our speaking class because you wanted to communicate. Could you talk a little bit about that and what that's done for you and being an active community member of Becoming the Better You?
So I got involved with BTBY as when we met, and that really set off the spark for me. And I learned that I wanted to share and I wanted to speak, not just in communities, but also on panels. I took the BTB as class, and that showed me so much about telling the story, engaging my audience, delivering a message that would stick. I can't say enough about the speaking class. It built a confidence in me that was already like an ember that was just kind of, smoldering. And that was a great class. And what that also taught me is I don't have to be anybody other than myself when I speak. And so what that's also done is now with my job, it's made it so that anytime there's some kind of public forum to speak on, I'm always the first one up there that engages the audience and gets everybody motivated and speaks on whatever topic, safety or whatever we need to speak on. And it's gave me a level of comfortability, really, when I speak. It's, yeah. And then as far as educating myself,
That is so.
I
just want to jump in and say,
Go ahead.
I want to talk about the parallel, and I know this live TV and this delay, we're going to get through this. The parallels between the fitness commitment that you made while you were incarcerated, parallel to the commitment you made to yourself to change your life once you got on the outside, now to the commitment that you have to engaging and helping others do the same thing on your job and within your community. You're a true living embodiment of continuing the physical fitness as well as the mental fitness and putting in the work. And if people don't walk away with anything from this episode, I think they can learn from you that whether you're incarcerated or whether you're on the outside, if you put in the work, you can go from felon to fabulous. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You can go anywhere if you put in the work. If it's a desire inside you, then that means that you have the energy to pursue it. If it's even a hope inside you for whatever it is, a goal, something you want to you want to do, if that's your business, if that's going back to school, if whatever that is, if it's a desire inside you, then that means that you definitely have the energy to pursue it.
Absolutely. And if you want change, it's not going to happen if you don't do the work. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. And, I told my family, I'm not the same person that came out that went in. And of course, they don't know that because they only see you at visits or talk to you on the phone or through letters. But as the time went on and they saw the change, they started to believe that. And change isn't something just going to wake up and say, oh, I'm changed. It is a continuous, consistent mindset shift to focus on what you need to do the work over time that gets you to the change that you need. You did that. You improved your credit. That took time. So you had to wait to buy the house until you did that. But because you already put in the work, then you didn't necessarily have to wait to buy the car. You maybe wanted to wait financially, but the work was already done. And you were able to go in and get yourself a vehicle. You've been getting promotion after promotion. Your relationships back with your family, even with your son, your parents, all these things that are transpiring. You finally have the life and you're not looking over your shoulder. You're not waiting for the next shoe to drop. You're not waiting for that. I told you so, or I told you would never amount to anything. And, look at you. You're not doing the things that you should be doing. I said, you're not worried about any of that anymore. And the thing that I really see is, although as a felon, we're not proud of our past, but we're not living in shame from it anymore.
Yeah. I'm not embarrassed by it.
Right. It's formed me into who I am now and why I do what I do.
Pretty much anybody, if you know me well enough, then you know who I am.
That's right.
You know where I've been. We tease at work about my time at the gated community. Right? But I'm not embarrassed by that because without that, and I said this in the beginning, all those things that happened were things that were meant to happen to develop me to be the person that I am today. And it also gives me the drive. And now I'm even further into fitness. I teach at 2 gyms. I teach group fitness at 2 gyms.
You've got your certification on some things.
I got my certification. I got my certified personal trainer certification and my nutritionist certification. And I'm now, I'm almost done with my group fitness certification. And so it's allowed me to build strengths to encourage other people to go for their own goals, whether they're fitness goals, whether they're goals in business. It's given me all different levels of ability to motivate and encourage.
Well, Sarah, we've just got a couple minutes left. What words of wisdom would you share with somebody that's just coming out of incarceration?
Don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself. Don't fall prey to the self-doubt or the limiting beliefs that being a felon will hold you back.
And how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm Sarah Bastin. I'm on Instagram, Bastin Sarah. And you could send an email to me at fitnessontheinside@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, Terrence, do you have any other questions before we wrap this up?
I don't have any other questions, but I do want to salute you, Sarah, for definitely being the epitome of going from felon to fabulous and to living this fitness lifestyle, not just the physical fitness lifestyle, but the mental fitness lifestyle. Many times we have to utilize that muscle in order for us to continue to get stronger and to continue to move forward. And in the beginning, it can be hard. It can be heavy lifting. It can be painful. But if you do like Sarah's been doing, staying consistent and staying the course, then you can go from felon to fabulous as well. So we thank you for taking time to share your story here on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
And as we end, make sure you stay tuned and watch, going over to FromFelonToFabulous.com, see what's going on. More great episodes coming. If you're interested in being interviewed for the show, if you've got a similar story, then go on over to FromFelonToFabulous.com, fill out the contact form. We will see you next time. Or do you want to be the person that's helpful, that soothes, that loves? Because you can still stand tall and be as big as you want to be when you are this person.